My dear friends in Christ, I welcome you to the first Sunday of the season of Lent in the year of the Lord 2025. Our theme for reflection today says, someone pay the price for the life you have today. Be appreciative. I would like to begin my reflection with a story of a man who had 3 kids, a boy of 10 years and 2 girls, one of 14 years and 9 years, and another of 9 years. This man had the practice of always calling for a minute silence over every meal for the repose of one Mr. and Mrs. Phillips. At a point, his children queried him why they have to always remember Mr. and Mrs. Phillips at every meal. In response, this man told his children how these Mr. and Mrs. Phillips were the instruments God used to save his family from total annihilation and the hands of poverty. In fact, according to the man, when they were still infants, they lost their mother due to they had no money to take her to the hospital. And it was this Mr. and Mrs. Phillips who accepted to take care of them until when he, their father, could get a meaningful job to take care of them. Eventually, after years later, this Mr. and Mrs. Phillips died. And this man made it a practice always to remember them at every meal for saving his family from annihilation. This little story opens a window from which we can look into the instruction of Moses in the first reading of today, where he tells the people of Israel, giving them a creed that they must recite whenever they bring the fruits of the land the Lord promised to give them as an offering to the Lord. And according to this creed, they must acknowledge that their ancestor was a wandering Aramean who later settled in Egypt, but was saved from annihilation and affliction by the powerful hand of the Lord, who brought them out of Egypt and settled them in their own land, a land so blessed, a land flowing with milk and honey. Thus, for the good they shall enjoy in the promised land, they must never forget to appreciate the source of their blessing. Drawing this down in our own setting, you and I are the new people of God today. And we have been made partakers of the blessed inheritance in which we are liberated from all oppressive forces and dominion of darkness and destined for glory through the suffering and death of Christ. The gospel of today shows us part of what Jesus suffered and endured to secure our redemption and to raise us to the state of being liberated from the dominion of evil. He spent 40 days and 40 nights of prayer and fasting in the desert. He resisted the devil's temptation to ease and convenience. This will prefigure his resistance to the temptation to put the agony and cruelty of the cross when he prayed at Gethsemane, Father, your will be done. My dear friends, a deep contemplation of the great price that Christ paid for our redemption, which the season of Lent invites us to, demands that we do not return to the paths and ways of darkness, namely the life of sin, from which we have been separated. And if by mistake we have fallen into sin again, we must quickly seek amendment in the sacrament of penance. It further demands that we make our lives an appreciation to God, who through the suffering and death of Christ redeemed us. This appreciation will be incomplete if we do not make out time for godly engagements, being active in professing the things of God. The words of today's second reading from St. Paul's letter to the Romans is instructive on the expression of our appreciation for the price paid for our redemption. We are enjoined to confess with our lips that Jesus is Lord and to believe in our hearts that God raised him from the dead. In so doing, we are saved. Finally, the words of Bishop Simeon Wobi in his 2025 Lenten pastoral letter is worth reflecting. He writes, Like the Israelites, we are prone to forget God's providence. Lent calls us to purify our hearts through fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, practices that detach us from worldly idols and renew our dependence on God. Our Lenten fast, therefore, is not a mere deprivation, but a participation in Christ's victory over temptation. May the Lord grant us a fruitful Lenten season. Peace be with you.